In my first book, which I published when I was living in New York, a lot of the poems were about California. And the poems were about one half in meter, one half in free verse. And, one of the many things that sort of confused, I think the reviewers, Bob Hass just walked into the room. And I remember the first time that I read his first book, the thrill that I got as a Californian of a poet who actually knew every tree he was looking at. And if you knew them too, if you'd grown up among them, there was this sense of actuality, which I think is very much at the heart of the best California poetry. I mean, a real engagement, being able to actually name the things that surrounded this. And so this is a poem that I wrote in my first book when I heard in my office a guy who had gone out to California, and somebody asked him how it was. He goes, "Oh, it's so ugly. Everything's all dried out." He says, "It's not beautiful like Vermont." And so I wrote this poem, which imagines the way that an Easterner would see this landscape versus the way that a native would. It was written in one long Jamesian sentence, but the editors of The New Yorker judiciously placed a period at the end of each stanza, giving it a grace that perhaps the original did not possess. California hills in August. I can imagine someone who found these fields unbearable, who climbed the hillside in the heat, cursing the dust, cracking the brittle weeds underfoot, wishing a few more trees for shade. An Easterner especially, who would scorn the meagerness of autumn, the dry, twisted shapes of black elm, scrub oak, and chaparral, a landscape August had already drained of green. One who would hurry over the clinging thistle, foxtail, golden poppy, knowing everything was just a weed, unable to conceive that these trees and sparse brown bushes were alive, and hate the bright stillness of the noon, without wind, without motion, the only other living thing, a hawk, hungry for prey, suspended in the blinding sunlit blue. And yet, how gentle it seems to someone raised in a landscape short of rain, the skyline of a hill with no more trees than one can count, the grass, the empty sky, the wish for water.